And after you get through studying all that, what are you going to do with that little pet fear that you have been cuddling all of your life? In other words, I would like for you tonight to develop such a tremendous hatred in its purest sense against fear until you, if you had a choice to be afraid for 2 minutes or to die, without any hesitation, you would accept death. Can you arrive with this much hatred of fear? This is the way I live. In other words, if you're going to make me spend 2 minutes in fear, what will I do first? Kill me first. You say, is this too strong a policy? No, because if I spend 2 minutes in fear, will I be dead anyway? The question comes to mind, can fear kill? And if so, how? Let me tell you about a story of Siamese twins. This has been recorded in medical history. They lived in North Carolina. They decided to really make the most of their life. They both married. They lived approximately a mile apart. It's interesting that they had married sisters and they alternated weeks between homes, and they each had reared wonderful children. At the age of 43, one of the gentlemen got a cold which developed into the flu and then later into pneumonia. And as he was laying on the bed, the doctor was examining him, and the doctor looked up and told the other twin, "Your brother just died." Now, the doctor did not believe this to be any type of a crisis at all. He knew that just 3 months prior, in Philadelphia, they had performed a successful operation of cutting 2 Siamese twins apart, and both had lived. So the doctor, in his own mind, was preparing for a simple operation to cut the man free from his dead brother. But the brother who was alive had not heard of the operation in Philadelphia, and by the way, he had had a fear all of his life what would happen to him if his brother died. Now, can you visualize the thoughts of having a dead corpse attached to your body? Well, let me tell you exactly what happened. 42 seconds after the doctor announced the death of his brother, the other brother died. In the medical books it was recorded, death by fear in 42 seconds. It's a choking feeling in his neck, and actually he cannot breathe. I know one particular psychologist, I was in his home, we were visiting, he had a telephone call. A lady was choking to death, and yet there was nobody in her home but herself. This particular friend of mine quietly told her, "Now I would like for you to keep talking to me and keep thinking about what you're saying. Now I'm going to leave my phone and drive to your home, and you just keep right on talking into the phone as if I were here, and don't you have any other thought until I arrive." This kept her mind off the fear, and the choking sensation did not actually kill her until he arrived in her home and was able to help her. So we say then, fear definitely can kill. I even have another way to attack it. Let's assume tonight that everything that you've ever feared happened. Do you want me to tell you something that's worse? The fear that you've had that it would. There's that much torture and that much agony. Would you be better off tonight to have everything that you fear go ahead and happen and not fear? You would. You would fall in love with yourself to such a degree that you couldn't believe that there would be this much heaven on earth. In other words, the reason you can't stand yourself is because it's justifiably so. Anyone full of fear is very decrepit. And how can you love anything full of snakes? If I had the most beautiful home you've ever seen, and if there really were rattlesnakes 2 feet deep on the floor, could you enjoy my home? By the way, some of you are interested to know where in the world I get such an illustration of snakes 2 feet deep. This actually happened. This couple down in West Virginia got married in the winter time. They were going to have their honeymoon in this cabin. And this cabin was built very unique because the fireplace was built into the side of the hill where the natural rocks were. It was a very beautiful thing. So they went up there for their honeymoon, and naturally, what's the guy going to do when he carries her in over the threshold? Cold cabin. He went out and he got wood and he built a roaring fire in that fireplace. Now, you know what snakes do in the winter? That place was full of rattlesnakes. Those rocks were just solid. And what happened when that big roaring fire started? Well, later they were in bed, see? And he happened to look over on the floor, and he couldn't see the floor. The snakes were that thick, he didn't know what to do. You couldn't get up and run. That was one night, one girl on her wedding night really clung. There was no place for her to go. They didn't sleep all night. It was a horrible night. But you know, as the fire died down and as the cabin started getting cold, the snakes all went right back in where they came from. And by the next morning, there was no snakes out, and the fire was dead, and the cabin was cold. Even a honeymoon is not heaven with fear there. Not only should you clean all the snakes out of your own subconscious, but I think you owe it to your spouse and to your children to actually help them do the same. This reminds me of a story of my first son. He wasn't even old enough to crawl. He was on one end of a large bed, and it happened that on the other end we turned a vibrator on. Now, the minute the noise of the vibrator came on and actually began to shake the bed, the little baby began to cry from fear. My wife's first impulse was to shut the vibrator off. I held her hand and said, "No, just wait." Now, I know this is hard for you to do this. It was hard for my wife as she watched. But the little baby took both hands into the sheet, and not being able to crawl, he pulled his body forward. Now, the first effort to go forward, he only made about an inch. Now, I watched him very pleased as he continued his struggle clear across that bed, inch by inch, until he arrived at the place where the vibrator was. By the way, all the way across, he's crying. When he finally arrives at the exact position of the vibrator, he takes one little arm up in the air, and the vibrator, by the way, almost appears to be as big as half his little body. He takes one arm up in the air over top of the vibrator and clamps down on it until his whole body shakes. Now, at this particular point, he stops crying and begins to laugh. By the way, I didn't want this to go any further. Immediately, I pulled the plug and stopped the noise. I wanted him, before he had lost his victory, to enjoy it. He had conquered fear before he had learned to crawl. Now, when a boy begins to grow up in this particular fashion, he learns that there's nothing to fear, and whenever he is afraid, he knows there's only one thing to do, and that's to conquer it. Now, of course, I realize that this has some repercussions. I was reminded of the time one morning I was sleeping in. By the way, I had taught him to be self-sufficient. He had already dressed himself, gone out to play with the children. A neighbor lady woke me up about 10 o'clock in the morning. She knocked real excitedly on the door. I come to the door and I wanted to know what was wrong. She says, "Look!" I walked out in the yard and looked, and there was a tall Douglas fir, probably 100 feet tall, and there was my son in the top of it. She was scared to death. I looked up and I said, "Oh, wasn't that wonderful?" And I turned around and went back in the house, went back to bed. By the way, as I was in the upstairs looking out the window, the lady was still standing there. She didn't know what to think. Now, I expected this. If I had run out and said, "Oh, no, you come down out of the tree right now," I might have put some fear into him. He might have slipped. He might have fallen. Oh, let me tell you one other thing before we leave this. The next 3 days, he had lessons in climbing trees. I showed him which limbs were rotten, how to tell the ones that were rotten, and how not to fall. But do I want him to fear? Which would I rather have in my son? A broken leg from a fall or fear? Any day I would choose a broken leg. The broken leg will heal. Fear could ruin his entire manhood. If you eliminate fear, have you eliminated all doubts? Also, have I eliminated all lies? In other words, when you get right to the bottom of it, if you can eliminate fear, you've got almost everything negative out of you. You just ask yourself, why can't I do this? Why don't I go there? Why can't I be this? When you get right down to the bottom of it, you're afraid. Why does a mother worry about her daughter when she's on a date? Fear. Any which way you go, what's underneath a weakness? What's an inferiority complex? Well, when you get down to insecurity, insecurity is nothing but a fear. So if you could actually tonight clean your house of fear, would you love yourself? Well, I would too. Everybody in the world would love you. You would be lovable if you didn't have fear. The reason that people don't like you is because you're not likable. And it's pretty hard to like somebody who's scared to death. I mean, what is there to admire in somebody who's shaking in their boots? You can pity them, can't you? Can you give them sympathy? But love's a different story. Therefore, you really have to love yourself before you can love others, and you almost have to love yourself before others can love you. All last winter, I believed that on my ranch were whiteface. This is really interesting because if anyone had come to my ranch, they would have called them whiteface. However, this spring, calves were born. And what do you suppose the color of the calves' faces were? They were pure white. In fact, they were so beautiful, so clean looking, they didn't even have any fear. I walked up to one of them, picked it up. The cow backed away as if I might hurt her. The calf showed no signs whatsoever of fear. As I looked at the mother cow, I thought, you know, her face needs to be washed. As I looked a little longer, I thought probably the whole instinct system needs to be washed. She's afraid and she's dirty. Now, everybody loves young things. The calves are so beautiful. Everybody says they're so cute. They don't say anything about the mother cow. Let's take the same illustration in a different area. Look at a flower. When it first opens its petals to the world, does it heal you? Is it beautiful? In other words, it's something lovely. We pick flowers. We grow flowers. We want them around us to remind us of what beauty is. Because you see, the flower doesn't worry. The flower has no cares. In fact, if we could learn the secrets of the growth of the flower and apply those secrets in our own life, we could become as beautiful as any flower. When you think tonight of your personality, think of a beautiful rose as it opens in its full glory. And then ask yourself, why doesn't my personality open like that? And then answer your own question. There's only one reason: fear. Not only could we use flowers tonight, we could use birds. Just think of the little bird nest that you saw when you were young. Think of the joy of watching a mother bird feed the babies. In other words, do you believe that little babies, be they birds, be they calves, be they even puppies, do you believe that they could hurt you? No. There's no way they could harm you. Then do you have to have a defense against them? Not at all. I was thinking of the time that we put in a new lawn. Each little blade of grass came up brand new, fresh, tender. It was beautiful. Later in the fall, after many children had played on it, after it had been roughed up, It didn't have the original freshness. Have you ever seen a little dust around on plants, and then for a cool, fresh rain to sort of wash the whole air, the whole atmosphere, the whole earth, all of the vegetation? And then things become new again. Let's let fear tonight represent the dust on the vegetation of your own life. And let's let love represent the rain that washes everything clean and new again. You know, this reminds me of another story. We have on our ranch a little mascot. It's a Saint Bernard puppy. And we have a very appropriate name for this dog. In fact, this dog has earned its name. We call the dog Lovable. He loves everything. The other day I saw him in the pasture with a horse. I couldn't believe my eyes. After he'd gone around one leg completely kissing it in a circle, he made his trip to the next leg. You know, Lovable continued until he had loved all four legs of that horse. Not once did he realize that that horse could step on him and hurt him. By the way, do you suppose the horse wanted to hurt the puppy? Does anybody want to hurt you when you're innocent? When you're naive? Let me tell you another story about the puppy. Friends come to visit us at the ranch, and they see the puppy. They say, "Oh, how beautiful, how cute," and they rave about the puppy. Then they pick it up in their arms. They cuddle the puppy. And some of them, on impulse, before they know what they've done, have kissed the puppy. You know something? They've never done any of that to me. I wonder why. Well, you see, they don't believe that I'm innocent. They don't believe that I have the qualities of the puppy. The other night, we had a picnic at the ranch. Approximately 30 people enjoying the grass down by the lake. And out comes Lovable. How long did it take Lovable to conquer every human being there? It was a matter of seconds. Now, his actual ability to woo the people amazed me because before I knew it, 4 different people had given him their food. By the way, each of the 4 did not know that the others had done so. And finally it dawned on me that little puppy's going to actually entice everybody to give him their food, so I had to actually pick him up and carry him away. I wasn't really too successful because before the evening was over, he had eaten so much food that he could hardly move, and he was laying sleeping, enjoying all of his new friends. Let's go one more step with the puppy. I brought a German Shepherd puppy out of the barn, and I wanted to introduce Lovable to the German Shepherd. Now, these German Shepherd puppies are fierce, ferocious. They're not supposed to be afraid of anything. But when Lovable first saw the German Shepherd puppy, she started right toward it. Now, of course, she was wagging her tail. All she wanted to do was kiss it and love it. The German Shepherd puppy became afraid. It backed up about 3 feet to try to get out of the way, and Lovable just kept right on coming because Lovable couldn't think of anything except love. Do you know that German Shepherd puppy began to yell and squeal as if he thought he was going to be destroyed? What do you suppose he did? He puts his tail between his legs and he runs in the bushes and hides from Lovable. Fear never understands love. There is a purity that every human loves, even craves, be it in a flower or a puppy. This in human personality is dynamic and creative. It generates life. It makes all around it feel warm, young, and of greater value than ever before. This kind of person never seeks or grabs, just the opposite. They actually give the impression of vastness, infiniteness, something so big and wonderful that there is room for all to live and express, for all to be and do. This miles and miles of heart is so big, it knows no disappointment, no loss, only good news and gain. The courage of love is always seeking ways of greater fulfillment, always productive, goal-oriented, yet never so busy or rushed that the minute details of life pass him by. Can you visualize both concepts of infiniteness and finiteness living in a close harmony of complete enjoyment and gratefulness? These latter two concepts describe the fruit of a life of love. Even though the person lives above the trivialities of the petty world of fear, suspicion, and doubt, it also has a condescending love of thoughtfulness, always helping where help is needed and wanted. This almost exotic escape from inward care allows a real relaxed and confident way of living. Once you begin to plant your field of good grain, a harvest is inevitable. Allow the concept of dilution to rid you of all past negative pressures. Then enjoy the abundance of good things. No matter how hard you have to work during the next 6 months, your new life will be worth whatever price you paid. All negative thoughts, when added up, equal nothing. Can you imagine that? Therefore, if 90% of your past thought life has been negative, we could say that you're losing 9 hours out of every 10. If it were just lost, you might survive, however it's worse. The 90% overcomes the 10%, and eventually your whole life is lost. It adds up to nothing. The next time you think negative, remember, you're actually giving up your good moments. As a person begins to be more positive, to enjoy life more, to notice details, to be more thankful, he then has the ability to do so in even a bigger way. The reverse is likewise true. To him that hath, more shall be given. To him that hath not, what he hath shall be taken away. If you think negative tonight, then 10 years from now, you'll think more negative. If you think positive thoughts tonight, then 10 years from now, you'll be thinking more positive thoughts than you are tonight. Thoughts beget their kind until you become a slave to negativism or until you enjoy the real freedom of living. Let's illustrate it by weightlifting. A gentleman goes in, he's going to develop muscles. He walks in to pick up the barbells. Do you know he can't lift them? He has to start out slowly with small weights. But if he's faithful, if he continues, if he's persistent, week after week he begins to increase the weights. And as he increases the weights, he's able to lift more. Eventually, he's lifting all the weights that they have on the barbell. In other words, does he have freedom? Has he developed muscles? Does he begin to enjoy the ability to actually lift weights? This is the way it should be with positive thinking. In other words, if you use repetition, if you use our block technique, eventually, even after the initial labor, the pains like we have in weightlifting, in other words, when you first start out, it's not always easy. There's sore muscles, there'll be stiff joints, but eventually you break the pain barrier. Eventually you begin to actually love the discipline of thought control. And by the way, if you really do enjoy thinking good thoughts and enjoy real perfect thought control, it's worth every price you pay. Do you realize that basically You've got to learn self-love. In fact, if you really do not love yourself, you will not be able to use the materials from experience 6 through 10. In other words, it's essential that the basic, actual step of loving yourself be accomplished before you proceed to actual listening to experience 6. We say the last 5 experiences are based on the fact that you are deeply, head over heels in love with yourself. And remember, as we've said earlier this evening, you can't love yourself if you're afraid. You can only love yourself if you are full of courage, courage that is the actual result of a deep love in your whole being. Why not tonight allow love to flow from your head in complete abundance until you're confident of who you are? And then upon this platform, stand boldly until you do not even know fear, not even the slightest acquaintance. Then turn your head upward in total admiration of your head until you welcome the rain, the sun, the wind impartially, with none of the 12 R's, which we'll learn in a later experience. Then and only then will your growth be natural, beautiful, and as lovely as a rose. And about the time you've forgotten about yourself, for only your head exists at this point, then and only then will you be surprised by the chance remarks. What a radiant, dynamic personality she has. She's as pure as the driven snow, and as lovely as the dew-washed rose, as rare as the morn, as exotic as the sunset, tender as a newborn baby. Everything of me cries out, I love her. How would you like to have that type of response from every human you meet from now on? In other words, even the people that presently that you think are mean and spiteful will cry out that they love you in spite of themselves. Nothing can resist you. Now, what I would like to do as we summarize our 3 hours tonight is actually describe to you that there are really only 2 things. There are only 2 thoughts that you can have. One will be love. The second will be fear. The only answer to negative thoughts, that is, thoughts of fear, is love. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity. And the greatest of these is charity.